Today's project is a lot of fun and it's pretty easy, so there's no reason not to make some for yourself. Let's make some Christmas stockings. This project just requires a small amount of fabric, a sewing machine, and about 45 minutes every time. And we even give you a free PDF pattern. I'll be making a few of these to really show you all the fun directions you could take these and really be creative with them. And like I said, the options are endless, but if you want to make one exactly like this is our Krypton in the Dorado Snow color and a 2 to 3 ounce veg tan panel in the tan color. Making all of these has really put me in the holiday spirit, and I think it'll do the same for you. So let's get started. First step is to print out your pattern, but since it's a printable pattern, now we've got to put it together. This is as easy as cutting out all the different shapes and then putting them together with masking tape. Once we've cut out all the pieces, we just have to arrange them this way, and that's all it takes to make the pattern. And since I made several of these already, I made a pattern out of poster board that's a little bit more rigid, easier to trace around than just the plain paper, but you could absolutely trace it with just the paper. So we're gonna bring in our main fabric that is the main part of the stocking and set our pattern piece there. And if your fabric that you're using is different on the front and the back, we're going to need to do one half and then flip it over and make a mirror image of that first piece so that the right side of the fabric is facing outwards on the front and the back of the stocking. You can use a pen or a chalk pen or even a Sharpie to create that shape. And the reason I chose this fabric is that it's on the thicker side and it has a good bit of body to it because I don't want my stocking to be floppy. So this will give it that structure I'm looking for. So there's that first shape, turn this over. Also make sure you know what is the right and wrong side of your fabric so that you know which side to place your trim and decoration. The front side of my stocking will have the toe pointing to my right hand side because I've never seen one that points to the left, so I don't want to break that unwritten rule. Now we just got to cut it out. And if you're wondering why I didn't just fold the fabric over and then cut out both layers at the same time, I actually tried that the first couple of times, but I found that I can get the shapes a little bit more accurate making them this way. Probably because I do more leather work than I do fabric work. This way just makes more sense in my head. And while I've got these pieces out, I'm gonna fold it over and mark a guideline on the back because I'm gonna fold this edge over and baste it down before it gets sewn later. Then I'll repeat that on the other half. All right, we'll set our fabric aside and start working on the leather pieces. So the cuff and any decorations are all gonna be from this leather, but you'll notice we actually don't have a pattern piece for this cuff, but it's incredibly simple. It's just this top section down to this dotted line here, but you need to add a 1/2 inch of seam allowance on the top and the bottom, which is easy to remember, but if you're like me and you want your pattern to be foolproof, you can make that piece. So it's the same shape with a 1/2 inch added at the bottom and a 1/2 inch added at the top. And instead of the Sharpie, I'm gonna use a scratch awl this time since I'm working on leather. And I'm just making one of these pieces. You could do a cuff on the front and the back, but usually the front part is the most visible part of the stocking, so I'm just gonna worry about making one of these. And I'm using a 12 by 24 inch panel for this. I got a big one so that I could make several of these stockings and have enough leather for decorations, like the A that you saw on that other example. But you could also do this with a 12 by 12 panel. You'll probably just be able to make 2 of them if you get that size. And exactly like we did for the fabric pieces, we're also gonna fold over this edge. So rinse and repeat those processes, mark a line. The only difference is instead of basting tape, I'm going to be using glue since this is a little bit stronger and leather is a little bit more of a stiff material, so you need that extra strength. So once I've applied that contact cement, I'll give it about 10 minutes to set and then we'll create that folded edge. And now that this is tacky, I'll fold that leather over right to that line we drew. Then that contact cement will hold it in place. Now bring out the basting tape and we'll attach this to the fabric. So now we've got both of our fabric pieces cut out and our cuff cut out and all of the edges are folded over on the fabric and the leather. And it's starting to look something like a stocking. But before I sew this on, I'm going to do the decoration. And I've got something fun planned for this one. The last time I did a letter and a little paw for my dog. But this time I'm gonna do one that's even more challenging. I'm gonna do the Sailrite logo. And adding a decoration like I'm about to is definitely optional. You can leave that out and it'll still look great. But you might learn a thing or two, so you can stay here and watch me do that. Or you can step to this time code if you wanna skip this step. So right here, I've got the Sailrite logo and its different components. And I'll kind of puzzle those together in a way that doesn't waste much leather. And the way that I cut out complex shapes like this is I will take one of the shapes with masking tape and I will tape it into place so that the paper does not move as I cut it. And then typically I use the Sailrite precision knife to make detailed cuts like this. But for this piece specifically, there's actually a couple rounded parts, and our corner radius punches happen to line up perfectly with that. So I'll use those to get perfectly rounded edges. So I'll get started with the rounded corners first. Now I've just got to connect those dots with the precision knife. All right, so that's one piece down. So I'm gonna repeat the exact same process on the other two pieces of the logo, but I'll spare you the trouble of having to watch me do that. So here's what it's gonna look like. We've got ourselves a logo. And I went in with the wing divider and marked a stitch line because this is a pretty detailed and intricate sewing job, so that's gonna help a ton. So now to glue the leather onto our fabric, I'm gonna use Fiebing's Leathercraft cement, and I pretty much found where I want the logo to go. So now I'll just apply the glue to our pieces, get them all glued down. And once this is glued down securely, the most fun and challenging part of the process is next, and that's sewing on this logo. And any of our machines are perfectly capable of sewing this project, but today I'm going to be working on the Sailrite Ultrafeed LS machine, and it's going to be perfect for this project for a few reasons. First of all, it's got on a knurled foot, which is going to be great since I'm sewing both leather and fabric, and I won't have to swap anything out because it can handle both of those. It's also got the monster wheel with the hand crank on it, which is going to be perfect as I sew all this detailed work right here. I'm actually going to leave the motor off and just use that hand crank so I have the most control possible. But then once the decoration is sewn and I'm doing the rest of it, I'll put the belt back on, turn on the worker bee motor, and finish up the rest. And anytime you plan on hand cranking, it's important to remove the belt, and then I just kind of tuck it underneath right there. And now that that's removed, when you hand crank, it's going to be a lot smoother. I did just one back stitch since this is just a decorative seam. And right here you can see the speed at which I used the hand crank to get a feel for how fast I was sewing. I love that I can have complete control of my speed and be able to slow down and pause as I approach a pivot point, or if I realize I've drifted from my guideline. And one thing I did while I was marking my stitch line is I did some little points with my scratch awl and pivot points. So there's one right here at the tip of the anchor. So as I approach that, I'm gonna take it still really slow like I'm doing with everything, but then I'll raise the presser foot if I don't happen to land right in it and make any micro adjustments so that I hit that exact point I want. And doing it this way will take a little bit longer, but I like having that little bit of extra control when I'm doing something as intricate as this. And once I finished sewing, I trimmed those threads and sealed them with a thread burner. Now that our logo is stitched on, it's time to stitch on the other leather piece. So I'm just adding a guideline right here of 1/4 inch. Then I'm going to use basting tape to attach this to the fabric right here at the top. And we've got to sew this now because if we sew it later, we'll be sewing the stocking closed. Now when we sew, we'll be sewing this fold over closed, the leather fold over closed, and we'll be attaching the two pieces together. Now I've got to reinstall the belt, turn on the power, and keep sewing. And don't forget to sew the hem on the second panel, the one without the leather that will become the back side of the stocking. All right, and we're getting to the end here. All that's left is to put these pieces face to face, inside out, and then use clips all around the edges, sew it up, add our ribbon, and then we're all done. And once your pieces are together, if there's any sections that don't quite line up, you can always go back in and trim some extra material so that it lines up properly. And the last thing to add before we sew is to add some sort of webbing or ribbon to act as a little loop so that we can attach our stocking to some sort of hook. I use basting tape to keep both ends of the ribbon together, and I also use it to attach it to the stocking before I sewed it. And so we're going to place this on the side seam on the heel side of the stocking at an angle facing inward, because this is going to get sewn and flipped, and so eventually it'll go the opposite direction. But for now, place it about right there facing the inside. So this combination of upholstery fabric and leather makes for a pretty thick assembly that most home machines would struggle to sew through, but the Ultra Feed has a high foot clearance and plenty of power with the worker bee motor to make this an easy sewing job. With the perimeter sewn, all that's left is to turn it right side out and see what our final product looks like. So then just go in and push out all of those rounded corners, and you'll see the stocking shape start to take form. And there we have it. I think it looks great. That looks fire. Sewing that S kind of gave me that feeling, that magic tingle, the crafter's high.
Yeah.
I've had a ton of fun making these stockings. The possibilities are pretty much endless on what colors and materials you can use. So far, my favorites are the one that we just made, and then this one right here with the leather on the bottom and this plaid fabric on the top. So I'm gonna pick between one of those two and make a set for my family. But anyways, thank you for watching this video. If you wanna give me a Christmas present, you can do that by liking and subscribing to the channel. It really means a lot. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.